Now, we return to Ted Malone, overseas.
One of the most colorful stories I've run across in recent weeks is the adventure of a crew in a burning fortress that almost dropped on London. When the fire seemed likely to reach the fuel tanks, the pilot gave the signal for the fellows to hit the silt, and they all bailed out. All but the pilot himself, Lieutenant Edwin W. Martins of Ogallala, Nebraska. The bombardier, Lieutenant John W. Beck of Lima, Ohio, lit in a tree, swinging like a pendulum until he cut himself loose. His co-pilot, Lieutenant William J. McAloney of Bardillac, North Dakota, had a close call but a pleasant reception. Just as he prepared to dive through the escape hatch, he found his parachute was upside down. Turning it around, he bailed out successfully, and landing in a field was met by a lady refugee from the buzz bombs of London, who promptly invited him in for a cup of tea. Lieutenant John Goulden of Des Moines, navigator, and the top turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Roy L. Wright of Indianapolis, made the descent together, calling back and forth encouraging remarks until they lost each other in a layer of clouds. Tail gunner Sergeant Brestill lost his boots when his chute opened and came down in his stocking feet. Ball turret gunner Sergeant Emily Lopez of Monticello, Utah, tore up a few tree saplings in a nursery, but was uninjured himself. While Sergeant Makowski of Endicott, New York, and William J. Elias of Martins Ferry, Ohio, almost started a riot when they came floating down out of the sky. The people apparently suspected them of being Germans. The sweet old lady who saw Sergeant Elias settle to earth came out with a broom to take him prisoner. In spite of all he could say, she was about to attack when a local home guardsman came up and took him prisoner to rescue him. In the meantime, the burning ship was circling over the heavily populated London area. Pilot Martins, realizing what might happen if the burning plane crashed on the city, had climbed back in to make a last effort to put out the fire. Grabbing empty flying bags, he beat on the blazing walls of the ship, and carrying at the burning pieces, he threw them all out, until finally he succeeded in getting the fire under control. And then, preparing to set down at the first airfield he could find, he was greeted by a barrage of flares warning him not to come in. Puzzled at this, he set the ship on automatic pilot and went back through the smoke to see why they'd warned him away. Peering out through the bottom, he could see the wheels were down, and he still thought he could make it, so he tried again. This time the control tower did not attempt to prevent his landing, but he saw ambulances and crash crews rushing out on the field. The big ship circled, settled, came down slowly. As he touched the ground, there was just a hesitation, a shudder, and then a sharp crack. The ball turret guns in the bottom of the fortress were pointing downwards when the crew had bailed out. They might have caused a serious accident in landing, but luckily they snapped, breaking off like a couple of matchsticks, and the last man of the burning ship brought it safely in. As London, over which the plane had been hanging like a blazing torch, obliviously slept on. All in a day's work, the crew of the Berlin Special described it. But when they tell their grandchildren about the war, they'll always include this story. This is Ted Malone, overseas, wishing you top of the evening, and returning you now to New York and to Westinghouse.
Thank you, Ted Malone. The breathtaking experience of the boys in the Berlin Special certainly is worth the telling. And while we're on the subject of experience, friends, let me remind you that back of every Westinghouse appliance is the experience gained in making more than 30 million electrical appliances for home use. Regardless of what kind of electrical appliances you plan to buy after the war, it'll pay you to see that it bears the name of Westinghouse, leaders in everything electrical. If you know any friends or relatives of the boys mentioned in tonight's shortwave broadcast, won't you telephone them that Ted Malone spoke to their boy and that he was doing fine? And if you'd like copies of this or any of Ted Malone's recorded shortwave broadcasts, just send your name and address to Westinghouse in care of the Blue Network, New York 20, New York. Westinghouse invites you to hear its Sunday musical program over another network, and to Ted Malone every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, sent to you with the good wishes of Westinghouse. This is the Blue Network.